Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today for our virtual panel on infrastructure security for remote offices, and really just kind of talking about work from home and remote access in general. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products, and I am joined by an awesome group of folks today. A couple of our partners, one of our best customers, and a group that's really helping a lot of folks that have had some challenges, and they've addressed them head on. So I've got Simon Taylor, Executive Vice President from PacketWatch. We've got Travis Gibson, who runs infrastructure security and operations at Make-A-Wish. Les Dunstan from Authenticate, who runs infrastructure and engineering, and Brian Zog, who's kind of the brain trust skunk labs guy at Authenticate. So we've got an awesome group. I can't wait to share some of their thoughts with you and let them talk about the different ways that their customers or they themselves, in the case of Travis, have been able to react to the changes that we've seen in the kind of post-COVID world. And a lot of opinions are going to be expressed today, so everybody just take that for what it is, and hopefully everyone can learn something great. And thank you again for taking the time out of your day. I truly hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy, and we hope that everyone can get back to kind of some level of normalcy as soon as possible. And with that, I'm going to kick it off. So, as we've started to study, and there have been a million studies that have kicked off around, what did it look like for businesses as soon as this became apparent it was going to change the way that they operated potentially forever. I think the data that's starting to come out, we're referencing Spiceworks here, has really started to be somewhat shocking. And the honesty and or kind of forced honesty that we've seen in some of the data, right? If you take this first question around preparedness, right? Usually you don't get numbers this low in statistics, right? Because people are generally just not honest about their preparation. But I think that this problem that we face is so multifaceted, it's so dynamic and transformational that people had to take a minute and pause and say, did they feel like they were really fully prepared for something like this? And I think that that's why there's a lot of people on the call today. I feel like there's a lot of interest because people are still looking for ways to learn from others and how they address some of these situations, or how they've advised partners and customers on how to address these situations, and looking for ways to fix up some problems that still exist. It's at 39% of the respondents said that organizations would spend more on IT than previously anticipated during the pandemic. I do find that number to be slightly low. I think that a lot of organizations, and maybe if you look at the organization as a whole, costs have come down to some extent, although we all know what revenue looks like too for most organizations. But I think that IT is the one place where you've had to start investing in ways that maybe you weren't quite prepared for, and we're going to talk about some of those today. And I think that it's important that everyone kind of understand that the money does need to go towards some of these solutions, because they are going to help you navigate your way through the pandemic and the outcome of this. And then 45% of organizations were encouraging employees to work from home in March, right? As most of you know by now, that number is way higher than that. Anybody and everybody in the United States, at least, that can work from home is pretty much either being ordered to do so, or corporations are not risking the safety of their employees in order to drive people into office spaces. But I think it's very pertinent to kind of look at some of this data and say, hey, this is stuff we've never seen before. That's truly where we're at. And then what does this look like, right? Like how has the budget been spent? How are they taking these IT expenses and kind of laying them off across or laying the expend across their organization? It's the stuff that you probably would recognize, right? More hardware, more software, more kind of training on how to use certain things and do certain types of work when you're not sitting in the office or in some type of campus environment. More internet bandwidth, right? I was talking to the panel yesterday, and we were talking about just the number of folks that have come to us already and said, hey, you know, can I augment my internet circuits, or can I bring in the second redundant carrier, or whatever it is, right? We've been helping customers kind of navigate through that. Remote access and support tools, right? People are challenged with not being able to get to their end user and end clients that are serving as the corporate computing environment for these companies. And so whether that's because it's BYOD and they hacked it together, or because it just wasn't designed to be completely dispersed and never home at the mothership, there's all kinds of challenges that come out of there. And then for a lot of businesses, specifically technical forward businesses that are less brick and mortar, more e-commerce, et cetera, we have all experienced this wave of movement towards online everything, purchasing, online delivery, online takeout, you know, anything online, subscriptions. And, you know, I got some interesting data from my friends at Netflix the other day, and it's just nutty. I can't share it with you, but nutty how large of an increase they've seen in traffic and honestly for them expenses as well to keep up with the volume, both on the computational side and on the internet side. So with that, I'm gonna have our panelists kind of unmute, and we are going to kick off this round of questioning. Hopefully you'll get to listen to everybody's voice. I think everyone's dealing with the quarantine cut at the moment, so you know, maybe everybody kept best off camera, but we're gonna kick off our first question for the panel today and start talking about what we think, each panelist thinks organizations are struggling with the most regarding the increase in remote work, work from home, whatever kind of classification you want to bring to that. And we're gonna start with Simon Taylor from PacketWatch and kind of move through the list. And Simon, why don't you take this one away for us?
Hey, thanks, William. Yes, yeah, PacketWatch is a cybersecurity company, but we also have our roots in managed IT services. So we've really seen this from all sides. And I think everybody would concur that I think what really tripped everybody up was just the speed at which all of a sudden they had to provide remote capabilities. Most companies really weren't set up at all for 100% remote working. You know, they may have had some limited remote capabilities potentially for IT support staff or maybe vendors. So all of a sudden they're having to open those up to a wider population, which is inherently insecure. Of course, there's suddenly a massive run on laptops, and we know there's a lot of disrupted supply chains, so people couldn't get technology necessarily to be able to provide to their staff to allow them to work remotely. So really, a lot of people were forced to sort of have to deploy solutions that they kind of knew were inherently insecure, but they actually had no choice. They were forced. And I think one of the big examples there from our side, and what really gives us the most cause for concern at PacketWatch, is the amount of BYOD. Because they really can't, there wasn't enough corporate technology to deploy, there's been a lot of reliance on using staff's personal equipment and personal networks, and those are massively threatening for an organization. There's going to be a question later on about the threats, so I'm not going to go deep into that, and I'll obviously let some other panel members talk about some of the other things there. But obviously having technology that's not controlled by the company IT people is a massive cause for concern. So I'll leave that there and let the other panel members chip in on that as well.
Awesome, Simon. And Travis, for everybody on the call, Travis runs infrastructure and security at Make-A-Wish Foundation International. Travis, what does this look like for you as an end user, kind of a distributed chapter-based organization historically? What kind of challenges have you been faced with?
Yeah, thanks, William. And just in case anybody doesn't know, the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America, we have the very pure mission of granting wishes for children with critical illnesses. And we really believe in the power of hope, and now more than ever, the world really needs that hope. And because of our belief in that, we know that we live in a world, regardless of any COVID situation, where we can keep wishing. And so just thank you for giving me a platform here to kind of talk about Make-A-Wish, and also to kind of share my experiences and help everybody out with some of the things we've seen. So jumping right into the question, I would say that this was multifaceted for many people. The security is the obvious one. I think the very first thing a lot of people got hit with was performance and capacity, right? Which you were alluding to there, William. It doesn't always make fiscal sense for an organization to have an infrastructure and security operations that is set up to support a 100% remote workforce, right? That's not really fiscally responsible, especially for something like Make-A-Wish. So we obviously had to pivot fast. We were in a bit of a unique position because it is our 40th anniversary this year, so we had a lot of marketing campaigns. We've partnered with Phoenix NAP for our internet service, so we have burstable internet at the beach, so we solved some of those problems right away. But we ran into a lot of the same issues that Simon was with BYOD, getting people remote access into desktops. Again, was our very challenge. We had capacity issues there and took a couple days to spin those up. And then obviously are the security concerns, which we'll definitely dive into later here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis. Les, why don't you give everybody a kind of a quick rundown of what Authenticate does and who you guys are, and then maybe give us your thoughts on this subject.
Sure. Thanks, William. So Authenticate makes Silo, which is a web isolation platform. So it's designed to separate the things you care about from the things you cannot trust. Things that you cannot trust are like external third parties, public internet, unmanaged endpoints. Things that you care about are, data and SaaS applications, public-facing web applications, and enterprise endpoints and internal web assets. We've seen, I think I would talk about two things. So one is, just to follow on with what Simon and Travis both said is, a lot of people were caught flat-footed. And most organizations have never considered a 100% remote teleworkforce, and now they've got to move quickly to adopt. There's challenges around maintaining security and compliance oversight. You're trying to embrace new forms of communication and project management tools. And IT is rapidly embracing a new corporate and network paradigm, which is very challenging for all of the reasons that Simon illuminated. And from our customer side, like the thing that we were immediately hit with was several large federal agencies that needed to have a teleworkforce, and they had no endpoints. They had no CAC or PIV readers on these home endpoints, and they were worried about a widening gap in their ability to train and communicate while sheltering in place. And so we've had to take on a fairly large project on our side to enhance our CAC and PIV reader support. We're able to turn that around and got the organizations back online and training in the space of a few weeks. So it's been, it's been unique and multifaceted, as the rest of the panel has said.
Brian, for you, give us kind of your thoughts and viewpoints on the subject as well.
I think echoing what several of the other panelists have said, the challenges have been really multifaceted. And I come from a technical background, and I tend to think of things with technical metaphors. And I think this one hits us at all layers. We had to scale up our ISP bandwidth in order to support more throughput. You have to scale your VPN infrastructure. IT's hit with a lot of challenges, regarding hardware provisioning, supply chain issues. Hardware takes more time to ship, it takes longer time to acquire, but also just the simple fact of like at our company, we're shipping a lot of hardware to people's houses at a time when package deliveries are like on the doorstep. I'm not going to, the delivery person doesn't want to interact with you face to face. So you've got a lot of assets that cost a lot of money being shipped around. And then there's also, you might have been prepared with an MDM and BYOD solutions and VPN configurations, but now you've got to deploy them to a myriad of home devices. Some employees might have privacy concerns, and they're competing with distance learning and home video streaming and other services. And so the idea of remote work for everybody in all use cases is a huge paradigm shift that we have to respond to rapidly.
Absolutely. No, I think that we're all getting kind of hit multi ways. Even our organization, the internal guts of our organization are just like any others, right? Even though we're a highly technical company, getting people the basics, right? The laptops and the extra two-factor authentication devices or soft devices and setup and accounts and all these things. A very challenging environment to work under. So we're going to move on to the next question. What has this brought in terms of new threats and issues, right? And I think Simon alluded to this earlier, but we're going to start with Travis and talk through the kind of the end user idea of this. Like, what does this look like for Make-A-Wish Foundation? Or what do you think it's looked like for your colleagues? If you haven't struggled in some of these areas, what do you think end users are struggling with, and specific issues and threats that they're facing now, given their deployment constructs and kind of how they're accessing sensitive data?
Sure, absolutely. So, diving right into this, as far as threats for remote work, whether you know it or not, or believe it or not, your company has already adopted a BYOD policy, right? You're already using their personal devices, whether you or know it or not, and I think that's become more prevalent than ever. And so the information rights management type of threats need to be dealt with. Brian was talking about mobile application management, mobile device management, data loss prevention, multi-factor authentication. These are some of the tools that we need to start deploying as quickly as possible to help protect from account compromise, help prevent from data exploitation, because users are using their personal devices, and if they're accessing your Salesforce instances or Office 365 instances from their personal device, exporting information and data, that data is lost to you if you don't have any sort of mobile application or data management tools in place. So absolutely, enterprise mobility, BYOD, everyone's adopting it, whether you have set them up to do so or not. If you have SaaS applications, they are using their personal devices to access them. So I would say that's absolutely one of the biggest ones. Of course, there's the home office threats, right? Soho routers. There's a myriad of public vulnerabilities for a lot of the small office, home office routers that are out there today. I saw an exploit the other day where you could you could exploit a Netgear vulnerability. It was a 0-day vulnerability on the Netgear Soho router that would then allow you to pivot onto a Windows 10 device that was on the LAN. So definitely the home office security. I mean, one of the biggest things that we're doing is driving a security awareness campaign and giving people tips on, keeping their firmware updated on their home office routers and things like that. So.
Yeah, definitely. And Les, what are your customers doing? I mean, obviously you got some sensitive customers dealing with some sensitive things in government work, but what does this look like for them? What are they worried about? What's keeping them up at night? Les, are you there? We may be having a mute issue. There he is.
Yeah, here I am. So I think there's probably two that we're really facing. And so to some of those sensitive customers, enabling teleworking SOCs and security analysts to maintain continuity of their workflows while working from home, it hasn't actually been that big of a challenge for us. our platform was flexible enough to be able to maintain those workflows while they were on site, and so they've just shifted those to remote work, and we haven't seen too much of a struggle in those cases. The second one that we're facing is a little bit more challenging, and that's trying to find the better control points to what Travis was talking about with the BYOD and the zero trust access. Finding the right control points, whether that's at the SaaS application provider level, whether that's at an IDP, if that's something that you've implemented, whether it's an integration with your secure web gateway, or if it's just adoption, raw adoption of our product and platform. We're trying to meet customers at various levels around all of that, and we're finding a reasonable amount of success. And I think the benefit that is being paid off by doing this is, one, is you get the data policies in a place where maybe you can open up access, but maintain the ability to not download or not upload or not print, those sorts of things from a zero trust machine, but you still can give some level of access. And the second benefit that we're really seeing from that is kind of a common control plane and unified logging platform for this kind of access. And so we're seeing our customers really start to move towards that sort of adoption method to maintain their security and compliance oversight.
Absolutely. And Brian, do you have anything different to add on that from an Authenticate perspective?
Just extending a little bit on what Travis said about security awareness. I think it's important for everyone on the call to know that ransomware attacks are up. They've increased since COVID-19. Phishing and business email compromise attacks, and of course, bad guys being who they are, they're exploiting news and emails, targeting COVID-19 information, and so finding that balance of controls to get protections in place for your employees' home networks is really important. And finding ways to ensure that the security controls are balanced, and have that right mix, but also that you're promulgating that awareness so that people are vigilant. The metaphor I like, there's a metaphor that we've had that we've used internally where we kind of say we went from having 4 offices to having 110. And
it's crazy. I mean, I definitely see that. I mean, we see the office is everywhere now. Distributed office, fully meshed, right? That's the next thing that everyone's gonna start bringing out. So, and Simon, can you wrap this one up for us? Kind of tell us what you think from a PacketWatch perspective. I know that you've got a lot of opinions on these issues and threats. Let's hear it.
Well, we do, and our threat intelligence unit here at PacketWatch is closely monitoring everything going on, and we're producing some very incredible intel that's being put through things like the ACTIC as well here in Arizona. But I mean, for us, it's just a massively increased threat surface, and as the speakers have said, all of a sudden, what was kind of nicely within a security perimeter within a corporation is now extended across everybody's home, and we've seen a lot of people rolling out en masse remote desktop services, and the bad guys are really picking up on that. So we're seeing a huge increase in attacks against RDP. Showdown, for example, has shown a 41% increase in the number of RDP endpoints out there on the internet, and they are being exploited, which is why, particularly from Russia, who's probably the biggest right now in terms of looking for those open RDP ports on port 3389. It's in their top 3. Of course, we have similar kind of capabilities for Apple and Linux, so VNC, so there's plenty of attacks going on those things too. So, remember that RDP is the #1 vector for ransomware today, right? Everybody thinks it's phishing, Phishing, of course, is huge, but actually RDP is twice as prevalent as phishing for ransomware vector. So, a real plea from us is, if you're going to roll out RDS and RDP protocols, please put them behind a VPN capability. Do something you can control first before people are just directly accessing their desktop devices.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that secure remote access is still one of the hardest challenges. I can tell you that, we were trying to figure out ways internally early on. This is obviously not where we settled, but, it was, the questions were there, can we get the end user somehow secure access to their desktop that's still online, still in the office, right? As you're trying to figure out how they're going to get to some of the most secure components. And ultimately, I think, for the better, we decided that, RDP in every desktop that we have in our environment is probably not a great idea. So we definitely took different routes, but I think that people are desperate. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for ways to get access to things and remotely accessing stuff. The common protocols that everyone thinks are, easy and the best are the way in, right? SSH, RDP. That's your keys to the kingdom. So, all right, so we're gonna jump on and talk a little bit about some solutions, right? So I want to hear what's working, what can people on this call do, implement, think about, and we're gonna start with Authenticate. They've got some pretty cool stuff. Les, give me a rundown of your stuff, but also just talk about what else you think people should be doing and strategies they should be taking and looking to implement.
Sure. So I mentioned two earlier, right? One was the CAC-PIV support and access from home using CAC-PIV readers for authentication. So that's one area that we've implemented, and if there's federal folks on the call, we can certainly help in those areas. The second one is the SOC and the security analyst workflow, the CSIRT teams that are clicking on malware links and phishing links and anything else that comes across their workflow. We've been able to just out of the box be able to help them. Some of the newer things that we've been working on with a couple of customers. So we have one where they have a Zscaler secure web gateway integration, and they want to be able to keep all social media and webmail and online storage solutions off their enterprise network and even from their home network. So they're rewriting rules based on URL categories into our platform so that they can keep that traffic isolated and off their networks. One of the more intriguing ones that we're working on right now is with Okta and an IDP isolation play. We can essentially work with Okta out of the box, where if you're coming from a corporate IP or from a trusted endpoint, you're able to access Okta in the native browser like you always would have. But if you're coming from a zero trust machine or an unmanaged machine from an untrusted network, that can be elegantly rewritten into our isolation framework with just a user click through. There's nothing to install on that zero trust machine. There's nothing to manage on that untrusted machine. And you can set your data policies however you want from that configuration. So that's really where where we've been going, and where we've seen a lot of the interest. I know there's Beyond Corp has just come out and been released, and we work in a similar fashion with that. That it's interesting, with the IDP and with some of these next generation firewalls and with some of these advanced proxy authentication pieces, they're great in being able to determine device disposition and be able to give granular access based on those dispositions. But once they're kind of out of the picture, it's between the zero trusted device and the SaaS provider to provide all the oversight and security around there. And so, with inserting our web isolation control plane in between that, or inserting that into that transaction, you really provide, complete oversight into what's happening during the entirety of that session. That's where our area of focus is at the moment.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that there's a lot of challenges as you look towards trying to get everybody the secure, trusted access to potentially the most sensitive data that our world and or even company specific have. And Brian, you want to throw anything on there?
Yeah, just as a footnote to what Les said about our ability to work with identity providers to control access based on a variety of parameters like location and endpoint configuration. We worked well with Okta. We can also implement the same thing with Ping and Beyond Corp. And then also Microsoft has a play in this as well called conditional access, and we play well with that as well. I like to say when you take the browser and you move it off the endpoint, which is what we do, a lot of interesting things happen, and there are a lot of new capabilities come into play that might not be obvious. One of those is because we operate that browser, we allow the customer security teams to extract all the logs from that browser down to their own security tools, like their SIEMs. And we really give full visibility into what happens in the browser to the security team without having to do all the traditional SSL break inspection. So the endpoint to the service, to our service platform, to the remote SaaS application, the SSL connections between them stay whole, and yet you have more visibility. So that's very novel. And then, as Les mentioned, part of that isolation of that browser traffic means that security analysts who, the SOC workflow often has a location dependency. They've got some operations center, some location that they're used to working, maybe a secure site that they work out of to do their SOC work. You're able to allow those SOC analysts to continue to work and maintain their SOC function, even though they're remote, without any additional risk to their home networks as they do their security work, reaching out to the malicious content. So there are some very interesting, very novel solutions out there that this remote working opportunity sort of invites us to adopt.
Definitely. And Simon, at PacketWatch, what are you guys helping customers with? I mean, I think that you're talking to people every single day, various organizations, trying to help them with a myriad of solutions. What's coming up most for you guys?
Well, as you can imagine, we've been doing a lot of plumbing. Okay, so we've certainly been helping our clients quickly put in, secure remote desktop capabilities, load balancing them across a lot of multi-factor authentication. We've been helping with to try to introduce as much security as we can to any existing capabilities. Lots of VPN work we've been doing. We've been putting split tunneling in as well because people have been having performance issues. So, can we farm out some traffic one way and then only have the necessary corporate traffic going back through the VPN capabilities? But one of the things we've been doing quite a lot of, and I think I'd really give a shout out to some of the vendors who have really stepped up to, try to make capabilities available for folk, even if they're not necessarily their customers. So we're a big CrowdStrike partner, and CrowdStrike have been very good at making available CrowdStrike Falcon licenses for people's personal devices. Now, Brian actually raised a good point about how acceptable that is. In fact, I'd like to talk about that a little bit later on in one of the other questions. But if you're going to be forced to have rely on people's personal devices, you've got to try to get some kind of protection, some kind of telemetry on those devices to at least give you a window. Otherwise, you're flying completely blind. So, we've had a lot of success with rolling out some CrowdStrike capabilities for those environments. One area I would just like to talk about quickly, because it's completely ignored, I think, and that's good old voice, right? People still need a lot of telephony in their organizations, and they rely on it. So, how have organizations adapted to provide telephony to now, who are remote workforces? So, did they have voice over IP capabilities? Are they now relying on people using their own personal phones? Has that lost some identity, corporate identity? Are we now displaying people's personal numbers when we're making business calls? So we're also a Nextiva partner, another local Phoenix success story. So we've been helping also with some voice over IP rollouts to allow people to essentially have their office phone and office identity with them at home. So they're not having to, even though they may use their own equipment, it's not being exposed. The client is seeing the corporate phone numbers and not people's personal phone numbers. So just thought I'd add that little extra bit in.
Thank you for that. And Travis, I think as it comes to Make-A-Wish Foundation, you guys maybe have some anecdotes to share. You were a little bit better set up for this than others, but I'm sure you've been working on a few things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of prioritized at Make-A-Wish 3 things, right? The first thing was the human component, right? And so I talked about security awareness, and we really drove home a campaign right away. We have a hosted security training platform provider that we leverage, and they quickly put out COVID-19 awareness materials, right, that we were able to leverage and quickly push out to our teams. We actually personally caught several COVID-19 impersonation attempts, phishing, spoofing attempts coming in from organizations like the WHO, where they were trying to spoof the WHO and come into our organizations. And we took those examples out of our email security gateway and showed those to our users and really hit that home with them. And of course, I talked about, securing their home environment. We gave them tools to do that. And then internally, from a centralized enterprise technology perspective, the 2 focuses were really on what I would call the core foundation for information security, which is the identities and the access management piece. And then, of course, data discovery and data protection. So many of you have mentioned IDPs, and I even heard conditional access. So just a quick note for anybody out there: if you have Office 365 today, you might have a P1 subscription, and if you do, you have additional access capability. And therefore you can set up things like SSO and MFA today with no additional cost to your organization. So we focused on identities and access management and getting as many of our corporate applications centralized into our secure authentication broker for single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. So that was a really big push the first week. And then from a data discovery, data protection, we implemented some DLP tools and started enhancing our DLP strategy using certain Azure information protection and information rights management to discover what type of data we had out there and where it was. And then we implemented things, again, going back to some conditional access policies, but also some, if you've ever heard of Microsoft Intune, it's a mobile device management, mobile application management platform. So we've implemented mobile application management, which to tie back to some of the privacy concerns that were mentioned with that on people's personal devices, mobile application management really helps ease some of that anxiety because it is not full device management. The IT administrator does not see much, but you do have the ability to wipe data if devices are lost or stolen and so on. And so those are really our big 3 focus areas.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Travis, I'm impressed with the amount of technology that you guys have brought to bear, right? I know that's hard for nonprofits a lot of times to sink time and effort and money into some of these projects, and you guys should be commended for how well you guys have not only just built up your technology and centralized things and helped, I don't think you mentioned too in depth, but Make-A-Wish is a conglomerate of chapters of organizations that are helping people locally, and Make-A-Wish International provides the backbone of all that for these organizations. And your centralization projects that you've gone through over the last few years have really helped and benefited in this situation more than you know. And that kind of brings us into some of the last couple questions here. What does it look like? What are the future challenges that are we faced with, right? What are we going to struggle with for a while? I think it's important for everybody to try to have awareness around this. And Brian, take us from that technical angle. What's going to be the one thing that just kind of sticks around and we have to deal with for a long time?
I think one thing that I think has challenged us is we've had these supply chain issues that and capacity issues that came up, and of course we've worked very closely with you, William, and the PNAP team to make sure capacity is available, and we've been able to stay in front of our demand thanks to you providing us with additional capacity. It's worked very well, and PNAP's been very responsive and accommodating of all of our requests.
As much as we can be, Brian.
Yeah,
as much as we can be.
It's been great so far. So, and then I would say, as far as things that will stick around and that I think personally will be a positive, I think the remote workforce change, it'll continue to put some pressure on how we do it safely and how we adapt our tools and procedures. But there's no assurance that this situation isn't going to be revisited in the near future. This opening might lead to follow-on measures. I know internally at Authenticate, we're having a lot of discussions now about remote work and how our workplace looks after this is all over. We've demonstrated to ourselves that we could do a lot more remote work than we were doing before, and there's a lot of internal discussions about what of these changes that we're making now, which of them remain permanent, and there's a lot of opportunity there.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And then, Simon, for you, what's the future hold for your customers? How are they gonna get through some of this and address some of these challenges that are gonna stay around for a while?
Well, I think let's be realistic here. We're not going to put this toothpaste back in the tube, right? So it's not going to go back to the way it was before. People for the first time have had experience of working from home, and frankly, a lot of people like it, and they like the flexibility. The IT folks have done an amazing job in really adversarial conditions to provide them that capability. So I think this large scale working from home is going to be around for a long time. So we need to gear ourselves up for doing that. And in fact, even the reports about productivity have been very encouraging. So I think even the management suite is going to be quite keen, I think, to have people continue that kind of productivity boost, which we have seen from working from home. So the real challenge is going to be, as we go forward, then how do we provide that secure remote access capability, and frankly, without relying on, or less reliance on the BYOD and people's personal devices, or at least if that's the case, making it as absolutely as secure as possible. And I think, the thing that is always going to be a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge, certainly for us in security, is that largely there is apathy amongst workers regarding security. And it's great that, and I'm very delighted to hear Travis puts a lot of focus on security training. But we have to assume that the user themselves, they just want to do their work, right? They just want to get along with it, get their job done. So it's our jobs to make sure that they're not endangering the organization. I'd like to bring up that point Brian made a little bit earlier. I mean, if we are going to be using people's personal devices, then we're going to have some control over them, and that could be an MDM, or it could be some other type of technology, and there's going to be some reaction against that. People are not going to want corporate oversight of their own private devices if those private devices are being used for work. So that is going to be a big challenge, which we're going to have to overcome. So I think those are the main points for me.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, Travis, is there anything you want to throw on this? What do you think is going to be the thing you're going to be stuck dealing with for a while?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to say anything new here, probably, but I mean, there was already a business requirement before COVID-19 to access my data from anywhere, any device, anytime, right, in the easiest manner possible. And I think that, going back to what Simon was saying, I really like the metaphor on the toothpaste too. That was a great one. I'm going to use that. Nothing's going back to how it was. So that's probably going to be one of the biggest challenges. Users are going to continue to try to do what's most convenient for them, as Simon alluded to, and it's our role to help protect them and the organization.
Agreed. Les, you want to throw anything on this fire? Because I know the next one is something you definitely want to hit on as well.
No, I think we're narrowing in on what the trade-offs are going to be, right? How do we balance access and control, right? And maintain, privacy. How do we maintain compliance, right?
Agreed.
If I can roll right into Q5,
Good.
all right. I mean, the world completely changed. This is an opportunity to be able to introduce some more of it. As Churchill said, never let a crisis go to waste. The user behavior has changed. Where we're working from has changed. If there was ever a time to make a seismic shift in your current approaches or thinking, it really doesn't get much more disruptive than this. And I think that's really what we're trying to do internally as a company, but also as our position in the market and as something that we can offer and bring a piece of the puzzle and be part of the solution to help our customers face those challenges. We're working as diligently and as hard as we can to try and help meet them where their needs are. We've had some really early success stories around it, and we're trying to build on those wins and continue the momentum.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll kind of toss on this is that, we do believe, Simon mentioned it, that there is a long-term net benefit to more kind of remote work. I do have concerns long-term about people intermixing work and home forever permanently and making it just like a you never turn off thing. I know, for example, myself, we have, as a family, we're basically either working or living consistently all day, every day, right? And in an environment that is challenging, that is hard. Simon, I want to toss this back to you. Are there anything you're seeing as like the benefits and the payoffs that might counteract some of this? That's the challenges that we've seen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positives that's come out of this. I mean, whether we liked it or not, we've just done a mass global test of work from home capabilities. The internet didn't crash, which is phenomenal. But I do think part of that as well is actually some vendors have done some really good stuff, without being forced or having some sort of legislation. We've seen vendors step up. We've seen them be able to handle capacity. They've increased the security of their products. I do want to tip a hat to Zoom. I think they did a very good job to do that. We've seen vendors, as I mentioned before, like CrowdStrike, reaching out, trying to provide their capabilities on a kind of free basis. We've seen streaming providers and media providers voluntarily pulling back to try to make capacity on the internet. So I think we've seen a real social response from the industry, which I think is terrific. I think the other thing I'd like to be able to also mention is that this has provided a real, I think then maybe for the first time in some organizations, a real appreciation of IT at the C-suite. They were called upon and they delivered. And I think and that's a real benefit, but it has to be leveraged, right? You've got this newfound respect, I think, in the executive suite. So leverage that, build on it, right? But you need to maintain it, right? Keep that up. But I do think it's a great time potentially for IT now. It's become less of a, oh my gosh, that's just a cost center. I think they're now being seen as a value center, maybe for the first time in some organizations. So, grab it and run with it.
Absolutely. And, I think there have been some questions, a couple of folks have talked about, how much longer can we go like this? How much longer can we do this? Right. And I think that ultimately what we see is this is going to change, right? We are not going to be stuck in our homes, don't leave, don't go anywhere forever. But what we are going to see is a more dynamic workplace, right? There will be more working from home, better video conferencing capabilities, more collaboration. I think if we can control that enough to say that there is a optimal pace of work and outcome that we get to where we say, this is easy, this is great, collaboration's great, and we get a lot of work done in a short period of time or a shorter period of time. I do believe that ultimately we can get to a place where productivity is just net better, and potentially that this work-life balance thing gets more achievable for a lot of folks. I know that sounds crazy right now, including as I say it to myself, who's probably working 13 or 14 hours a day in some capacity right now. I think that we're going to get better at this. I want to thank our panelists for taking time out of their day, bringing their thoughts and their ideas to this conversation. There was some wonderful tidbits. We are capturing this from a recording perspective, and I know that our organizers are going to make a lot of this available. I wanted to leave everybody with a few kind of key take homes, right? What can you do to make sure that your infrastructure, your security is as best as you can make it, right? And I know that you're not going to be able to implement everything that we talk about. These are just going to be the highlights. There's no vendor specific stuff in here. Just kind of take it for what it is. The presentations and the handouts as well, so you can download that and grab it. These are kind of the no-brainers, right? Get everything as secure as possible. The stuff that you should have been doing if you weren't already, making sure that you have some type of secure remote access, two-factor authentication as many places as you can get it, right? Getting the kind of that access broker capabilities to make sure that you're not admitting untrusted devices or even unhealthy devices into your environment. And I think that a lot of those, depending on what you need and kind of how in-depth some of those capabilities, tools like CrowdStrike do a lot of these things, right? Sophos does a lot of these things. So you can get a somewhat simplistic consumption model for a lot of these capabilities. Looking at the second one, really try to make sure that your networks are highly segmented and secure and least privilege is implemented, right? So making sure that you get your infrastructure to the point now that all of your access patterns have changed, the way that you access data and networks has changed, and the inputs and the pathways that you've created to get to sensitive information have ultimately, in a lot of cases, changed. You got to make sure that you have things isolated, segmented, and things aren't talking to things that they shouldn't, right? And ultimately, you look at any of the major stuff out there, the ransomwares and the like, a lot of it has a kind of a foothold in being able to just get through your network with a vengeance. I think that's kind of all I will say on that one. Reviewing everything, review your configurations. You got everyone set up. You rush. You got everyone set up for the VPN. You got everyone set up. Maybe you got 2FA enabled as well. So you got that kind of like authentication side well under control. But make sure that once your user gets there, once they get on the VPN, that they have access to what they need to have access to, because those devices, in a lot of cases, as Simon pointed out, cannot be trusted. So many people have made sacrifices to just said BYOD is what we're going to do because we have to. You can't trust those endpoints, period. Do as much as you can to ensure that they are not the compromise of your environment. And then the last one I'll kind of leave everyone with is, you have to look at your capacity. You have to understand what, we mentioned VPN and bandwidth here, but I mean capacity in general. Things are being stressed that you did not expect to be stressed, right? You have to take a look at those implementations and make sure that they are up to snuff, and augment is necessary because, as Simon pointed out, if you're in an IT function today, have the ear of the business. They understand that you are providing the lifeline for them to be able to continue to operate. So your opportunity is right now to get the things that you need, if you believe in them, to get them implemented. Budgets are tight, and you need to be reasonable about what you're spending the money on. But if there are security or network or other technical implementations that need to be made, now is the time to make them. So again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. I've got a great thing that we didn't really talk about before, my fault. We're giving away a $100 Amazon gift card to attendees that stayed to the end. And I'm gonna roll this beautiful wheel here that we virtually constructed to pick a name. Like seriously, check this out. It's called wheelofnames.com. You put in people's names and it makes a wheel. Oh, and it gave me the best name. So if I butcher this, I am so sorry. I'm usually really good with names, but Mark Krayenhagen. You can let me know if I did a good job in the questions area there, Mark. But we're gonna be in touch, get you a $100 Amazon gift card. Thank you so much to the panelists again. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us. I hope everyone got a chance to learn something new and innovative. And I can't wait to talk to you guys again. Everyone have a great day.